prepare. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our session. My name is Shala Ashi. I am one of the co-founders of Women in Big Data. Just a brief on Women in Big Data. We have started a Women in Big Data initiative in 2015 with one chapter in Bay Area and 15 members. Today, we are over 40 chapters globally, multiple regions, really great, good footprint in North America, in Europe, in Asia, and we have over 17,000 members. And the way that we count the members is really by our meetup, membership that we have in different, and some places we don't even have the meetup, but we know even our membership is more than that. But we are very grateful to how the organization have evolved over years, and with all, volunteers, very dedicated, grassroots and volunteer work that people have done with great, program training. We are adding mentorship. We will be looking into adding, other type of, program like certification. We have job board. You can go to our website, womeninbigdata.org, and learn more about the program. And now in US, we are a nonprofit, and some other countries, we are a nonprofit organization. So you can join us, you can help us to really, expand it the best you can help us. But thank you so much. And with that, I would like to talk about our today's session. I'm so honored to have Katie Murphy with us. She is founder and CEO of Expansion Group. I will let Katie to give her background and talk about the session. And so excited to hear about, what she is going to really discuss, which is critical role organization plays in data utilization. So it's very much nicely in multiple areas that we are interested to learn about, and how, data is being utilized in this important, organizational aspect. So I am excited to hear that. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Katie. Please take it from here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm really excited to engage. I want this to be a conversation. It's up to you, your comfortability. But if you have a question at any time, please unmute. It's hard for me to keep an eye on the chat at all times or see raised hands. So feel free to interrupt me at any point if you have any questions, and we can turn it into a conversation. So hopefully today you'll have some takeaways that you can apply in your organization. If not, at least there'll be a little brain candy for the day. So again, Katie Murphy, founder and CEO of Expansion Group. I'm going to tell a little story just to set the stage, if that's okay. So my first job out of business school was a loan officer for Wells Fargo. It wasn't my dream job by any stretch, but there weren't many jobs available for recent grads in 2008. But what I would do is work with individuals who had accrued about $10,000 to $50,000 in credit card debt. Yikes. And I found myself wondering, how did these individuals let this debt get so bad? And I know my privilege at the time was seriously showing, but what I learned is no one sets out to accrue that sort of debt. When they open that first credit card, they just don't know what they don't know. And so a few years later, I did end up getting that dream job. I always wanted to impact my community in a big way. And I ended up working in economic development, where I got to help companies set up new operations across Central Ohio. I was really good at my job and I loved it. And my work started getting recognized nationally, particularly by one client of mine. They were a craft beer company called a Scottish craft beer company called Brewdog. They actually asked me to oversee their entire expansion into the USA, and it really launched my career. Their growth was nothing I had ever experienced. And I found that I had special skills to help manage the chaos of setting up new operations and growth. So I decided to found my own company called Expansion Group. I had fast success in the beer industry, but then started working in the technology industry with companies like Singularity University and ThriveDX, formerly known as HackerU. And what I learned when working in technology was a lot about technical debt. And I started to make some connections. I started to see the same problems over and over again across organizations, all related to growth. And again, I found myself wondering, how do these entrepreneurs let this debt get so bad? I started referring to this debt as organizational debt. And again, I relearned that same lesson as a loan officer. They just don't know what they don't know. But the thing is, my team and I do. So we set out to build a system to pay off this organizational debt. And we're trying to teach it to as many organizations as we can. We really want to help them achieve the impact they set out to create and let them grow with intention. And so why I tell this story is you're going to learn a piece of that system today. And I hope you'll be able to apply it at your organization. I'm going to put an article about that I wrote about tech debt if you want to learn more about that in the chat here. So let's dive in. So today, my summary slide is missing for some reason, but nonetheless. So today you're first going to learn about the dependencies for sustainable growth. Then we're going to dive into a little bit more detail on that organizational debt. You're also going to learn about functional alignment and the role it plays in data utilization. And then you're going to learn how to spot areas of misalignment in your organization. And I'm going to actually show you a way to fix them. So the dependencies for sustainable growth, of course, include, money and things like that. But they start out with business strategy. So your business goals, if you're trying to grow to 500 people, or maybe it's more of a profitability, maybe it's impact, your product market fit, organization and role design, and tech and data. The thing is, there's that slide. We'll just keep going. The thing is, we prioritize funding, development, sales, and hiring at first. It's a natural process. It's a natural thing to prioritize these things when you're first starting out as a company. Actually, Shaw, if you don't mind, I'm gonna check and see. I'm so sorry about this, why my slides are out of order.
Sure.
I swear I checked this several times, but nonetheless.
I have the version you sent me. I think it was.
Yeah, I may just.
Was in order. No, it was it? Yeah, yes, it was. You will learn, and then dependencies,
Weird.
and then instead organizational debt.
It's okay. I've got it fixed here. So troubleshooting on the go.
It's okay. This is how tech is.
Oh, good. Fabulous. Okay.
So you're fixing it and you're going to reshare your screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There we go. So instead of powering through and embarrassing myself further, we are now fixed. So my apologies on that. So reset the stage. So what I mentioned was when we first start out in a company's life cycle, we prioritize funding, development, sales, and hiring. It's perfectly natural. But the thing is, this causes this organizational debt, this term I've kind of coined. Why? Because if you didn't prioritize that business strategy, technology and data, organizational role design, product market fit at first, you start going into debt in those areas. Debt that grows with you as your organizational grows. Now, the thing is, you have to start paying off that debt by writing things, get things out of your head, like those business goals, processes, be a bit more intentional about your org design, the structure of your organization, that kind of thing. Otherwise, you hit this period where your growth starts to stagnate and even decline. It feels like you're taking 2 steps forward and 2 steps back at any point. And I would love to hear from you if you've maybe experienced this particular point in your organization, if you've grown really fast, that then the leadership for some reason says, I know what's going to fix the problem. Data's going to fix the problem. And then they start overloading your maybe business intelligence team or your data analysis team with all these requests for reports. And it seems, I have seen this pivotal moment at companies time and time again. I'm going to open the chat. I'd really love to hear any stories maybe later on if we have time of this particular moment, and maybe some funny jokes that can be had. But so as I mentioned, these dependencies for sustainable growth, they have to start paying off this organizational debt in these 4 categories. And what we found is typically the first problem, the biggest problem area, is in this organization and role design. And I'm going to teach you a bit more about that. So a function, so functional alignment, what is this? So a function is a set of activities and responsibilities grouped by skill set. So it's your people operations, it's your finance, it's marketing. Now, functional alignment typically does not occur organically. So you can grow one or 2 ways. You can grow organically or you can grow intentionally. And typically when we've hit a period of high growth, we end up growing organically. And what does this look like? Okay, it looks, you have a hiring need, a certain task that needs to be done. So you develop a job description, you post that on the interwebs, and then you fill that position and decide who it's going to report to. That's more of an organic approach versus an intentional approach where understanding how your organization should function. Okay, finance has the following core processes. Marketing has the following core processes. We have a skills gap in this particular area, so we're going to put this person here. So that's a kind of an example of how you can grow organically or intentionally. And the thing is, most companies that grow organically, and it creates some misalignment across the organization. So some symptoms of misaligned functions, which you might relate to in your organization, can be duplicated efforts, even customer turnover. You'll start to see lower customer satisfaction numbers, decision paralysis, and then even just team dysfunction, which is not sustainable. You find yourself chasing these problems, these fires, instead of what truly matters in your organization, that impact or making a buck. Now, the benefits of aligned functions include optimization, customer retention, data-driven decisions, and a thriving staff. So how do we determine if our organizations are functionally aligned? We use a proprietary method called function mapping. So a function map is a visual representation of how the organization should be functioning in an ideal state. We then compare that ideal state to the current state of the organization, and it just in a visual exercise that you'll see here in a bit, it reveals where the misalignment exists. It's not an org chart. So your organizational chart is a hierarchy or a reporting structure, right? So the difference between a function map and an org chart, you may, for example, your CFO, for example, could be your people team could report directly into that CFO. Now that CFO may not be accountable for the operations and performance of the people team. They serve their kind of function in that arrangement serves as a coach, a mentor for that direct report to grow as a person, not necessarily running that function. So therein, your org chart would be very different than your functional chart. Your functional map would show you would want your finance and your people as separate, completely separate functions with separate core processes and success metrics. So that's the main difference between a function map in an org chart. Okay, so this is an example of maybe a current state function map of an organization. And I want to try to teach you to spot misalignment and what I mean by misaligned and aligned functions. So I need some volunteers here. Take a minute and look at this function map and let me know what issues you can spot. What incentive or accountability issues do you potentially see as part of this function map? And I kind of gave you a hint on the previous example. Anyone spot any? Get you warmed up. So this finance and people, right? So finance, people, and some internal systems. So from a functional, this may make sense from an org chart perspective, but from a functional perspective, your people operations should be even probably a high level function in your organization, right? It shouldn't just be stuck under finance. And then internal systems suggests technical systems. Are these skill sets aligned? So functional alignment exists when these skills and incentives are aligned in that function. Very different skill sets for finance, people, and some internal technology systems. So what other potential problems do you see on this map? Feel free to post in the chat or go on mute. Nothing under brand, it's just in its own little island. Yes, absolutely. Perhaps that belongs in another category that we'll see in a minute. Thank you so much, Tammy. Any others? Okay, I'll spot some for you here. So we've got product design under leadership, which is a really natural thing when a business starts out. But if leadership is responsible for product design, your user experience, and creative, imagine the bottlenecks that creates in decision making, right? So perhaps none of these three things should actually be under leadership. Leadership should be free to make data-driven decisions. And how could they possibly be able to get that data that they need in a functional organization like this? Also, you see these internal systems across the organization. So that's requiring technical ability of your marketing team, your operations team, and finance, versus how could you benefit from a maybe centralized systems team, for example. And then maybe QA and engineering under operations. Yikes. So I'm sure we've probably seen problems of that before. So shouldn't engineering and quality assurance be empowered to be solving problems, not maybe stuck in the day-to-day of just serving the organization? So pop in, let me know if you have any questions about those examples, but here is an aligned organization. So it's the same functions we saw before, but now you see under marketing, your paid channels, organic channels, brand and creative, leadership's at the top, right? So leadership should be functionally aligned to everything and not have anything directly underneath it. Products got design, your user experience, engineering and quality assurance, and operations has your people, finance, and internal systems. So what this creates when we view it here, so it creates skill alignment, best practices, but if you see all of these benefits at the bottom, you've got data utilization. Why do we have data utilization? Because now you can measure it easily your core processes and assign success metrics to those core processes. Otherwise, your teams, if they are functionally misaligned, find themselves trying to record this similar data, and it ends up being completely duplicated efforts. You also have no governance related to that data, which dashboard is right. I'm sure we've probably seen some examples of that in the past. So I'm going to dive in deeper of the next step to how you get to tracking information that measures the health of the business and making data-driven business decisions. So the next process in this function mapping exercise is Howie statements, is what we like to call them. So Howie statements are statements that we use for each top line function. We describe what that function is providing to the business. So marketing is how we grow brand awareness and generate leads, for example. I'm sure I could have come up with a better one, but that'll work for today's exercise. Product is how we build, in this example anyway, how we build our products and services and ensure product market fit. And then operations is how we ensure the business is performing at its best. So once we have these Howie statements, at least for the top level, although we really like to create them for each function, each sub-function below, it allows us to create a core process. So how do we grow brand awareness and generate leads? What do we do first, then second, then third? Or what are the different processes we have to follow in order to grow this brand awareness and generate leads? So for example, we have marketing strategy. We've got campaign planning and management, design, copywriting, video production, and asset management as an example of a marketing core process. Everyone's core process is different, of course. So then once we have that core process identified, we can determine what success looks like. So success may look like our strategy is performing as expected. So against certain goals allows us to pivot. Our brand is recognized by our audience in a positive way. Our campaigns are achieving the desired results we set out to achieve. And we are generating enough leads for our sales team to close. So when we go through this process of thinking big, starting at the top of how our organizations should function, and then what processes achieve that function, and then what success looks like to achieve that process, to achieve that function, then we're able to pull out metrics that are going to promote data utilization. Does that make sense? Do we have any questions, or anyone want to challenge my methodology? I welcome it. I love those kind of conversations. I'll pause here and let anyone pipe in if they have a question. Okay, great. I'll assume that.
Can I ask a quick question, Katie?
Yeah,
Katie,
go for it.
So when you work with the companies, this is just, for the purpose of, this presentation. Mm-hmm. But how do you help them to define their function? It's not always, the same function that you can apply to each company. So
yes, there are some similarities, but that's a great question. So how we start off is by defining the core products. What are the core and if we have time, I actually have some space in my Miro board that we can actually go through an example if you'd like. We can just take the conversation wherever it goes, but we start by defining the core products and then the target customer, because that varies depending on companies. For example, you may have buyers and users, or your buyers and users may be the same individuals. So that's a really important thing to understand. And then in one sentence, we describe the business model. So from there, in describing your core products, your core customers, and that business model, it's a really simple exercise to be able to throw out those top functions. So usually it's something like a business operations. You have something that is some function that is ensuring the business is performing at its best. You have some sort of growth function. That's different for every company. It may be more sales driven. It may be more marketing driven. And somewhere in the middle, you've got ways of ensuring that your clients are successful or delighted, for example, and then you have to deliver your products and your services. So because we've done this exercise so many times, we can lead these organizations through that process. We actually do this workshop setting is usually the best way to do that. But that's the flow, usually how we go about it. Does that make more sense? Did I answer your question?
It does. It does. Yes. Thanks.
Fantastic. Any other questions? Fantastic. Okay. So common mistakes that we see going through, well, having been through this process in companies that maybe haven't gone through a similar process is, and I kind of mentioned this before, diving straight into assigning metrics without understanding how the organization functions. What you end up is a really long laundry list of metrics and not knowing which is the most important. Now, you can stumble upon those important KPIs going through that approach. It's perfect natural, more of an organic approach. But starting at that big thinking exercise and really having a visual representation of how the company or organization should function really helps focus where those KPIs are going to be, successfully measured. So that not thinking big enough really becomes the problem. Being stuck in the mud, being stuck in the weeds, the sand, whatever metaphor you use. Shala, have you witnessed any other kind of common mistakes of going about trying to increase data utilization or trying to make better data-driven decisions? What other mistakes have you maybe witnessed in your career?
Nothing specific come to mind. Nothing big enough. Others you have witnessed. Yeah. A lot of issues that we face in companies is the culture and the momentum, in between teams. I mean, there is a lot of those issues that I have come across, not having the right, strategy really to put everyone, to have everyone on the same page. Those are the type of mistake that I have seen a lot, and a lot of culture issues. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Not low data literacy, for example, having a culture of low data literacy and maybe
right.
low technical mindset, that growth mindset can certainly play a part in this as well. So a word of caution before we kind of wrap up. So if you use this skill set, this system to help identify misalignment in your organization, I would pump the brakes a little because it can lead to some scary conversations and maybe alarm individuals' leadership when there's a particular approach to go about this. So if you do go back through these slides and perform that functional analysis on your organization and see a lot of misalignment, then reach out to professionals. Please email me and I can give you some next steps. We actually perform workshops to help generate buy-in among the leadership team. And I'm happy to dive into that with you and help you generate buy-in among your leadership team, because it usually a lot of times will mean some reorganization, but functional alignment doesn't have to be achieved just through a reorganization or restructuring. It actually can be done through process. So maybe that would be a great place to start, is look at what processes could better align those functions and work across teams rather than shifting butts and seats, essentially. And with that, so what you learned today, hopefully, or a little bit of brain candy, was the dependencies for sustainable growth, about organizational debt. We covered functional alignment and how the differences between how you can spot aligned function and misaligned function and how it relates to data utilization. And then potentially how to fix that alignment by going through a function mapping exercise. And with that, I just wanted to see if there were any other final questions, and we do have time to potentially dive in and do a real live exercise of that function mapping process as I described to you, Shala, if there's interest from the group.
Yeah, it would be good to see it in action a bit more.
Sure.
Because, for me, when I was looking at this functional alignment and stuff, we are so much right now geared toward, the organizational mapping and that aspect. And then of course, in every organization you have, a project team or sort of, a program manager or something that brings more of these functions, together. It just not something that I would work with, on a regular basis. But as I was thinking, okay, there's something that we can even apply it to our own women in big data. That would help us to even, function more. Yeah. Going through,
we can do that. We can use that as an example.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So I've got a board just to get us started here, and we can dive in, and just as I described earlier. So how would you describe the core products of women in data, women in big data?
Okay, so if I want to describe the product, it's not just, one product, but the whole, it's the vision that we do want to get, women back to the workforce. We want them to have, to be elevated. We want them to really, to really help them to get to really, what they dream of. It's really, based on, getting them to education and mentorship program and job opportunity to help them to really, get to the next level. Whether it is someone, just out of college, or someone that, looking for a new opportunity, especially in a growing field, such as data analytics, machine learning, and that, environment, or someone as trying to just get to a leadership position. All of them. It's really advancing women's career in the tech.
That's somewhat accurate there.
Right. It's all championing
skills, programs, and mentorship, as well as maybe educational material, that kind of thing. And we pretty much already said the buyers. So they are mostly women, but
of course, yeah, exactly.
Right. So maybe we say they're definitely consumers interested in entering the field of big data or advancing their career. And so in one sentence, we provide educational content. We provide content, skills, and mentorship for these women. I kind of did that here.
Yeah, up there. Yeah.
I went straight for it. We provide content.
We're not selling anything. We really, trying to enable, based on that.
To empower. We'll say consumers. Consumers interested in entering. The format stuff in a second. The field of big data or advancing there. Okay. This way. All right. I've got these Howie statements, a little small here, but just as a teaser to get us started. So how do we do this? So what are the functions that ensure that we're providing content and mentorship to empower consumers interested in entering the field? What are the top functions that come to mind? I'll get some sticky notes going here. What's maybe the function that grows the business, grows in the say organization here?
It's really, it's this kind of, if we're talking about training, being able to facilitate the workshop, organize it, facilitate, and getting the right, instructor, having the right content, delivering it, measuring it. So I'm not too sure how you're gonna. That's why I'm interested to see.
Certainly is over here.
You're talking about, the marketing. Okay, function with respect to.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was interested to look at. How what you're gonna call it in the context of what we do.
So let's put some examples here.
Of course, we do have marketing because we are really working also on the awareness.
So and that kind of goes under here. There's great social media presence. So marketing might
under marketing, right?
Here.
Of course.
Or I mean, it may be growth in general. There isn't traditional sales like there would be in other businesses. So it's probably more of a marketing approach. And then how do we? And there's definitely volunteer management.
The whole, we're talking about the organization itself. Yes, it would really building that global organization, which is all based on volunteer. But it has that structure that I mentioned. When I think about, organization, it's all about the structure of that organization, which has, sort of a executive, sort of a, if you call it, leadership. And then, depending on every region you define, you have a leadership at every region. You have it at the corporate, if we call ourselves corporate side of it, and then regional part, and then goes down to really, very local areas. So at every level,
So maybe chapters? Is that?
We have chapters, of course. We have chapters. Maybe our bread and butters are chapters.
Or how it might actually even be how the program, how things are executed, the products and services or programs are executed too. So this might actually be similar and the same. So where you have volunteer management and mentorship, the actually maybe a similar.
So some of the product or maybe programs, if I put, like mentorship or training and all of them under programs, it is really, maybe we define it at the global level. But then everyone would really, take it to the local level. And there are some local chapters because of what their community wants. They really define it, or they do something, different than what we have at the global level. So because we want it to be something that's meaningful to the community. Which you put it right. Yeah. I mean, the community engagement, and that would define, what type of programs they may need to do for their own community.
A similar structure here. And then this is organization.
Are we really exercising you to the limit now, given that we are not a traditional?
I love it. It's brain candy for me now, because that's our favorite is to work with nonprofit organizations. And I'm not sure if there's that designation for this group or not, regardless, impact organizations, some of that social enterprises, etc. So it really helps make the days worth it. So then, how do we ensure that the organization is performing at its best? Is there some sort of operations team?
Again, as I mentioned, at the level of the organization, we do have
global
executive committee sort of a thing that we pretty much oversee what goes on across.
So there's a board, right? So
we do have depend. We have a nonprofit in US. We have a nonprofit in India. We have a nonprofit in South Africa. Nonprofit in Nepal, in Canada. So each of them have their own board, but at the organization level, it's this executive committee, they are more of facilitating and helping to make sure we have synergy across, different region and share, a lot of these programs and helping to reach, every region and chapters eventually. So that's what it's not a decision making, it's different than, maybe some corporate type, but it is a place that we would definitely try to do some collaboration and have, to some extent, synergy between different regions. And the way that we measure our success, of course, part of it is the growth. Growth of, as I mentioned, we started with 1 chapter, we are now over 40 chapters. So showing this, growth of the organization and the members. We don't charge our members, of course, it's very organic. And that's how we would, to some extent. And then, number of training that we do, people that attend, the training, it will, our tracking and measurement and impact, definitely something that evolving as we get more, of these programs, is pretty much rolled out.
What I think could be an interesting realization is I imagine there's global marketing that happens, but then there's also chapter related marketing. And so what would be interesting about that, so then the actual current state of the organization would be something actually like this, but we'd actually have these in 2 locations, and they'd be global marketing. So what then becomes interesting is how we typically do this is first we'll map out the current state of the organization, and then we start changing the colors of these sub-functions by skill set. So what we would probably do is change this, because these are all very similar skill sets. Would you agree? Even
so every chapter that we have, we ask them to at least do 1 or 2, which either they would do awareness, they do training, they take on mentorship, they take on there are 4 areas that networking. So there are and so as you see, all the chapters have similar type of a structure. Some may do 2 or 3 of them, some may do just 1, depending on what's the need. And of course, on the global level, we have the infrastructure, our website, we have all the global social media that we do, and each chapter again have their own social media. So if they do awareness, of course, they need their own, social media. So.
So what then becomes interesting, so now that we see the programs is pretty aligned function from a skill set perspective. What we see is obviously the colors aren't all matched across the organization. So what becomes an interesting exercise is, well, what would it look like if we aligned our marketing, right? So together. But then it becomes a choice, becomes a decision at that point. Is this right for our business model, or should we have a global marketing team and we have a chapter marketing team? And then okay, the chapters are then a double click and have their very own structure here. So that would be a really interesting exercise to go through too. But this is kind of what it looks like when we go through these workshops with our clients. Is what we'll talk about, well, what does this look like when we consolidate these? What sort of benefits could that have to the organization? And under here too, we've got volunteer management and operations, a kind of similar skill set. So, and at that point, we align on what the ideal state functional state of the organization should look like compared to what it looks like today? And does that inform some additional decision making? Of course, you'd want to go through the next process of defining those core processes and then what success looks like. The next step after that, sometimes we do is a skills mapping or task analysis to understand, to bring the humanistic approach to it, to understand, well, what are the skills required to perform these functions? Okay, what roles have these skills in this, or the organization, and can perform these things? Okay, does it make sense for these individuals to be on one team, or could they be involved through governance or a syndicate process or a matrix organization or something like that? Now that would be really interesting. You could absolutely perform a matrix organization with this structure. A conversation for another time maybe. But does this make a bit more sense of how we go about this process and the benefits it can bring to an organization?
You mean right now to go through that exercise, or something?
Oh, I just wanted to make sure I hit the mark and didn't confuse you further, kind of just show the benefits of functional alignment and the functional mapping process that system we've created. So
I just see that chapter is lonely there.
So what I would probably then recommend is chapter so that it becomes kind of over here, chapter management becomes so this actually becomes like its own. The executive committee actually manages the chapters, and then the chapters actually have their own version of this, where perhaps they have so
they can tap into the bigger pool, but they have specific to their own local community.
Yeah, exactly.
Needed. Yeah.
So then you have that global look and then that chapter look. But what would be a really nice benefit is those chapters would understand, how does the larger global organization function compared to how my chapter functions, would be a really nice aha moment in a visual representation, because sometimes it's not always clear. Well, yay, that was fun. Thank you for being a guinea pig and letting me show the group how to do that.
Sure, of course, it's very different than, I think, maybe traditional organization, but some of these nonprofit, anyway, they exist. And if we want to make them successful, we got to go through the exercise to really understand some of the challenges. And how do we really go about this kind of exercises in order to rearrange what we have to be more successful?
We actually we're excited to at some point in the next year create a program for nonprofits specifically and how to run like a business. So stay tuned for that. Thanks, Regina.
Yeah, Regina is actually one of our original people that she joined us on this call. I don't know if she left or. No, Regina is here. I was expecting Regina to say something.
No, how can I interrupt such brilliance? This is so cool.
Oh God.
And it's a brilliant use of Miro, which I'm slowly warming up to.
It does take time, isn't it, Regina?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Different. Looks like I'm exercising different part of my brain.
Yes, I'm afraid it's my poor engineering brain is getting unrusted by Miro. It's great. So
yes, the same thing happened on my team. A very engineering focused individual, like, oh my gosh, it's too much. It's too much stimulation at first, but now he absolutely loves it now that he's figured out how to make it work for him.
Yeah. Well, great session, ladies. This is really fascinating. Thank you
so much. I wasn't sure it was a quiet group, which I expected. I expected it to be a quiet group, but so I'm sure.
Right. No, but we can definitely, our own women in big data at different levels, we can definitely use this exercise.
Yes.
To do better.
I would love for Katie to take us perhaps through a workshop. This was even just this little bit.
Yeah.
Really fascinating.
Right.
Happy to.
That maybe was amazing,
at our
Katie.
Different level, because I mentioned we have a nonprofit in US. Maybe that would be more contained and manageable exercise.
Yes,
we do need it.
Yeah, I think that would be a really great place to start.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%, Shala, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of heavy lifting, as you know, that needs to be
Mhm.
done, and this
Mhm.
will help, I think, organize that.
Right, right.
It helps provide a lot of focus, and that not many organizations have a visual representation of how their organization functions. So then it can just be such a beautiful thing for onboarding new talent and volunteers, and then maximizing maybe those volunteer hours of where to focus. So
Absolutely, we are lacking that functional mapping. We
Yeah.
know the organization, and that's how I was trying to just explain to you, but every time I said something, it went back to the organizational chart rather than functional,
Right.
mapping. It was
Right.
very difficult.
And that organizational chart. So what an org chart should change constantly, because people are always coming in and out, and they have different skill sets, and one individual may actually have the skill set to manage a variety of functions, but
Right.
it can still be in an aligned state. Whereas that functional map, as the company grows, the organization grows, it shouldn't really change unless something fundamentally changed, like a new product or service offering or something like that will change the map, or going global versus regional, perhaps, that kind of thing. But otherwise, it should stay, if you've got it right, it should stay consistent, and you should be able to hire against that functional map, is the way to grow with intention.
Right. Well, thank you. So, Katie, you may hear back from us for a different reason, but that was really a nice way for us to understand, this functional mapping and how data is really important in order to make the right decision on that
Wonderful.
organization.
Well,
So with that, I want to see if anyone else has a question or would like to do another exercise for 5 minutes.
You can always go back through and listen to the recording and do it on your own too, potentially.
Yes.
Even though
yes.
I messed up the beginning of the recording like that. I don't know. It was strange. I had created a new Miro board with the slides just to have, in case we wanted people to dive in. I wanted to have its own separate Miro board, and for some reason it
the version you sent me, the PDF version, it was fine. It was ordered.
Sometimes Miro has a bit of a mind of its own, but we troubleshooted. So thanks for
thank you.
That.
That was very good. So I have the recording along with the notes that you're going to send me with respect to that article that you have. And then the slide that you provided, we put them all together and we do a blog and send it out to everyone.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much. It was a great exercise. I appreciate that. Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.